Hello?
Okay.
All right.
Are we ready then? Should we start 3 minutes early?
Yeah.
Should we maybe scoot in? Let's start scooting a little bit this way. We should give Brian here a little more room on the speaker. Oh, yeah, that's good.
Aaron, is Drupal ATX?
Yes. Our Drupal Day.
Drupal Day ATX. Or either one? Either.
It's written on the board over there. In green.
Okay.
Okay, let's start a little bit early. We have, 2 minutes, okay. So, hello, I am Diana Montelian Dupuis. I am Director of Development and Professional Services at Four Kitchens, which might indicate to you that I have a preference for CMSs, maybe, but I don't. I'm, Todd, if you can cover your ears, I'm CMS agnostic. I actually care about 3 things. I care about words and ideas, and therefore applications that enable the internet to be used to exchange ideas. I care about not having to hack bad code. That's a big one. And I care about the right tool for the right job. So there is a theoretical argument that there would be a use case for many of the different CMS options that are out there, and we're going to wrangle with that a little bit today. So meanwhile, the the Twitter tag Drupal Day ATX. If you have questions that arise for the panelists while we're doing this panel, feel free to tweet them there, and Aaron is going to be keeping an eye on Twitter, and we'll answer those questions towards the end. And then also you'll be welcome to raise your hand, but Twitter users will get first crack at the panelists. All right, so let's start with introducing yourselves, who you are, your role, and the CMS that you're representing today, and perhaps the main reason why you have felt that dedicating so much of your professional career at the moment to that particular application, why that's been a good choice for you.
Okay, great. My name is Devin. I'm representing WordPress today. I've been working with WordPress for about 4 years. I have a website called wptheming.com that has tutorials and tips mainly for front-end developers working with WordPress. I also have a number of themes and plugins in WordPress.org, and I follow it closely on track in the core project. I'm actually not working with WordPress full-time now. It's kind of a side fun gig for me. I work with a company in town with a custom-built Python CMS, and before I've worked with Drupal, so I've done a couple things. But the reason I really like WordPress and the reason I devote so much of my free time to it is because I really love the community around it. There's a really strong developer community, really smart people involved in the project, and I like building things that thousands of people use and helps them set up their websites and get content out there and share what they do on the web. So that's me.
And I'm Travis. I'm here representing Django, which isn't traditionally CMS. It's more of a web framework that happens to ship with a CMS. I work at the Texas Tribune, and we do a lot of the traditional CMS stuff, articles daily, but we also do a lot of data projects. We're pulling in lots of data from the state government and trying to represent it and visualize that for people. And traditional CMSs tend to fall down on this problem. On a traditional CMS, it's more the big blob of text. You put text in, you get text out. When you're trying to represent the complex relationships of data, you need a richer framework for modeling that data. And that's one of the things that Django gives us.
My name is Todd Nienberg. I'm a partner co-founder and digital strategist for Four Kitchens. I'm representing Drupal today, maybe obviously, but I've been working in Drupal for about 6.5 years at this point, since the dark days of 4.7.2, if anybody can recall that. So why are we interested in Drupal? When I first got involved in web design and development, I was working with WordPress. And then I got involved in MediaWiki for a while, which was a very confusing time in my life. And then we picked up Drupal. And the main reason why we've stuck with Drupal would probably be the community around Drupal. So the people that we're working with the ecosystem of Drupal, the very strong commitment to free and open source software, but also that Drupal is really intended to solve major issues. It's more of an enterprise level piece of software at this point, but it's also tremendously complex. So that's a bit of the trade-off. I find it both rewarding and challenging to work with, and I really love the people that are involved in that community.
I'm Ryan Ireland. I work for HappyCog here in the our new Austin office. We've been here for less than a year. And I'm representing Expression Engine. Expression Engine is a commercial CMS made by a company called Ellis Lab. And one of the reasons that we use Expression Engine is because of its flexibility. We know that it is easily extensible. There's a large and active developer community. And Expression Engine really, because it is a commercial CMS, the community around it is big on making sure that they create high quality add-ons, commercial add-ons, some free, but a lot of them commercial, and so that the community can support itself in that way. At HappyCog, we definitely use Expression Engine for a lot of our sites, but we're certainly not just using Expression Engine. We are open to all sorts of CMSs. So I'm excited to hear about some of the experiences that these guys have had with their CMS.
Great. Right. So thank you. And the theme of community, we're going to come back to that idea too, because we'll look at both pieces: the contribution aspect of being involved in CMS and web development, and the revenue aspect of being involved in, because we have to still pay our rent. So let's ask the bright side first. What would you say is the greatest asset? And what you might want to do is describe a use case, because one of the things I think that these applications, they differ in that the use cases you might choose them for would differ, and therefore one would be stronger or weaker in certain circumstances. So if you might want to suggest a common use case for the CMS or CMF, or just F, and and then what you think its greatest asset is. And let's do the pain points too. Let's do both at the same time, the light side and the dark side. So a general use case, greatest assets, and also the pain point.
You guys want to take a stab at it?
We'll start with Ryan this time. Okay, yeah,
first.
okay.
With Expression Engine general use case, you see a lot of Expression Engine sites that are really content-based, magazines, newspapers. It's a lot. We do a lot of that type of work at HappyCog, and so it really fits in with that. But people also use Expression Engine to do storefronts. They use it to power all sorts of different things. There's two really great things about Expression Engine. One of the reasons that I like to use it. The first one is that you can really put any type of data in it, and it has this idea of custom fields, which I think a lot of them have. And there's also these different field types. There's field types that other developers create and sell or give away for free. And so you can put all sorts of different data in it. So any site that is thrown at you, you know that you can take that and put it in within the constraints of Expression Engine using these field types. Another thing is that Expression Engine doesn't care about your markup or anything like that. It doesn't try to impose any markup on you. So that's one of the nice things. I have this idea where you just drop in your static HTML into a template, and then slowly, piece by piece, you can kind of bring that to life using Expression Engine tags, and it doesn't really care. It just outputs what it needs to output. And that's one of the great things about it. It has its own template language that's simple enough for like a non-technical person to figure out. Expression Engine is really popular with web designers who are either in a freelance position or in a small shop where they're having to do multiple roles, like they're the designer, they're the information architect, and they're also having to be implementing it into a CMS. And it's great for that because they can easily understand the template language. It also can be extended, and it can be used in more complex ways. So people that are more developers are also able to use it as well. So it covers the range. Bad things, I guess. Pain points.
Not bad, just
okay.
painful.
Also bad. I think a big one that we run into in the work that we do is incremental updates or migrations. So moving, if we launch a site for a client and then 6 months later they want some new features and we build those, and then it's like, how do we roll those out? There's no good database migration tool for Expression Engine yet, and so a lot of times, if we have to, I've scripted migrations before, which is completely fine, but sometimes one-off scripting for migrations is actually more work than just going and just replicating those changes out into production. So that's one thing that's a problem. Other than that, everything else is all file-based. Templates can be all file-based. So rolling out and deploying changes that way is fine. Other pain points, I would say, is that it's difficult to get new people to use Expression Engine. They used to have a core version, which was free, sort of a limited version. You could only do certain things with it. A couple years ago, they did away with that, or it might have been more than a couple years ago. They did away with it, and that sort of limited new people, exploring Expression Engine, kind of getting their feet wet and learning about it, and building like their own site with it, and then be like, oh, I can use this for clients. And it's exactly how I got started with it, and that's a pain point in two ways. One is because it kind of helps or restricts our community from growing, because not everybody wants to drop $200 just to kind of see if this is a CMS they want to use or not. And that's a real problem. That's something that I personally have expressed to Ellis Lab as a problem, because I think that we need that little sort of handle that people can grab onto and learn about the CMS. For me personally, I have a book on Expression Engine and videos, and I definitely see that people aren't as fast to jump on the Expression Engine bandwagon because they're not like this easy way to get into it anymore. So that's a definite pain point in terms of like the community.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Drupal. Typical use case for Drupal, I guess there isn't one, because it's big websites, complicated websites, systems, communities, having to integrate an e-commerce piece with forums, with blogging and comments, and then you have to also tap into some other kind of database or system that you're pulling information from. If you have a site that has a lot of moving pieces and a lot of things you're trying to integrate all together, Drupal's really good for that kind of thing. So that often takes the shape of large publishing sites, newspapers, magazines, things like that, content-heavy things, but also community-heavy things. So the ability to then discuss all of that content, maintaining a user profile, and karma systems and all the things that you want with a community. Until a few years ago, Drupal was marketing itself as community plumbing. That was the phrase that was kicked around for a while. But at this point, really, Drupal is more of a framework than it is a system. It's expanded into something much more robust, which is sort of developer language for extremely complicated and hard to learn. So big systems, big websites, it is not particularly friendly for people who just want to set up a blog, or they have a small company and they want to set up some brochureware site or something like that. Not friendly for those people at all, unfortunately. That may change, however, through various hosted platforms that Drupal has. This idea of distributions, or the Drupal App Store. The notion of app stores is really starting to catch on within CMSs as well. So there may be changes in those areas to make that kind of application of Drupal more useful. So see, I can fill a book with all the things that are painful about Drupal. Things I like. I really like that the API is very well documented. The flip side of that is that the API is huge, but you can contribute to it yourself. It's entirely a community-built platform, which is really unique and really quite special. I like that it's highly modular, so it doesn't assume you want to do anything with your website out of the box. You install Drupal, and it basically gives you nothing, and that's by design, because you have to then tell it precisely what it is that you want to do, and it's not going to try to do too much for you. So building leaner websites can be really nice in Drupal. Drupal has responded to a lot of challenges over time, performance and scalability, how content is handled through fields, things like that. Drupal was one of the earlier CMSs to adopt the idea of having custom data fields. So let's have a date field, let's have a whatever field. And all of that stuff is getting rolled into Drupal core, and it's constantly being built on, which is something that other CMSs, paid CMSs, can't do, because they still have to allow the people who are making these paid plugins to make money continuing to sell those paid plugins, and they can't just suck them into core. Drupal does that all the time. If something's really good, it goes into core, because nobody was selling the modules to begin with. That's something I really like. Pain points. Okay. Hard to manage content. It doesn't come with a WYSIWYG editor out of the box. You have to pick one. That's a really common thing. It's not very easy to handle images. It wasn't until Drupal 7 that the idea of uploading an image to a blog post would happen in core. That used to be 3 or 4 modules that you'd have to install and configure just to be able to attach an image to a piece of content. Obviously, that's very frustrating. Migration path, there is none. When you're going from Drupal 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, you're not really upgrading. Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. There's not an upgrade path. You're not really upgrading, you're having to migrate all of your content. So you need to be aware of that. However, the positive side of that is that Drupal is very forward-facing and it moves very quickly into new challenges. So it's not trying to maintain backward compatibility like, say, WordPress, which is actually one of the great things that WordPress does. It really, really makes it a great platform for what it does. Drupal kind of ignores that and says that we're just going to keep adding on new things and we're going to forget the past ever happened. But we're going to be making it stronger so that we can focus on new functionality and new websites and constantly push forward. Worst part, theming system. So the presentation layer of Drupal is extremely complicated. I'm hoping that's going to change in Drupal 8 because there's a lot of talk about adopting something called Twig. Twig is a templating engine that was developed within the Symfony framework. It's a PHP framework. If you theme Drupal, you've already messed with PHP template, which is a thing it's been using since maybe Drupal 4 or so. That is likely going to go away. So whether something is in an object or an array, or how do you print it, or how do you hide it, or how do you render it, I don't know. All of those questions hopefully are going to be eliminated with a much faster and easier to use front-end framework, but that's still about a year or 2 away.
So for the first half of that, I was confused as to whether you were talking about Drupal or if you're talking about Django. So the strong point for Django is just about anything you want to do that has a request come in and needs to serve a response. It is a raw framework. As far as the content side of things, you have the Django admin that you can use. But one of the strong points is everything in Django is opt-in. So if you don't want to use the admin, just don't use it. Ignore that it's there. If you don't like the templating language that Django ships with, import Jinja or something else. You have the choice to pull in whatever you want, and nothing is forced on you from the beginning. At the end of the day, Django strives very hard to just be Python. So if you know Python, you can do whatever you would normally in Python inside Django. One of the things that makes it demo really, really well is the admin. You go set up your models, create the database off of those models and definitions for them, and register the model with the admin, and boom, everything just works. It demos really well because in 5 minutes you can set up a relatively complex site, or a non-trivial site at least, with a couple of different models, some relationships of various types between them, and have an admin that you can go in to edit. The problem with that is that the admin is extremely flexible, and that comes at the cost of complexity. It's really easy to get started in, but if you want to do anything tremendously custom with it, like we do at the Tribune, you have to become an expert on a system that's meant to be infinitely reusable and extendable. Most people don't realize that until they've already gone down that path and have committed to it, and they're like, oh, I need to start learning how this entire system is created and trying to understand what somebody was thinking 6 years ago when they coded this. Generally, once you go down that path and you understand, you're like, oh, wow, this makes perfect sense. That's exactly how I would have done it too. Or I would have never thought to have done this, but it's amazing. So that's its strong suit. It lets you do whatever you want to do, since it is a framework, and it does provide an admin to sort of give you that quick replacement. Instead of going into a database and editing something, you have an editor that you, or an interface that you can go into and interact with your models.
Okay. It's hard to think of a single strength of WordPress. It's a huge platform at this point. I think it powers 1 out of 6 of every websites on the internet, which is gigantic. And it has this huge community around it, which is really cool. I think the main strength that everyone kind of mentions with WordPress is its simplicity to set up. There's a famous 5-minute install. Like the talk this morning when we were looking at the dashboard, when you get in there, everything is kind of laid out for you. And it's pretty easy for someone without technical knowledge to just get set up, either do the install through their host, and then get right into it and start creating content. there's thousands of themes out there, so a small business owner can set up WordPress for free, go get a theme for cheap, and set up their entire website, I think, pretty easily in a day for almost free, which is a great sort of thing. But WordPress spans this, like, I think there's a lot of small businesses using it, but you also have WordPress.com, which is actually a single install of WordPress. It's a multi-site install, which is the 16th most visited property on the internet. I think it's huge. So it does scale. It has this really huge, can get big like that, but you also have people just using it for their personal cooking blog, like my girlfriend. So there's this range of uses within WordPress. So there's this focus on simplicity in the interface, and it was interesting also to see that talk this morning where they were showing how simple everything is. We're rethinking a lot of that for 3.5 to make it even easier to use things and for new users to get started with WordPress. So that's really cool. Another huge strength of WordPress is its plugin architecture. So everything is hookable and filterable in WordPress. And if you want to add functionality that's not there in core, you can write a plugin that will add functionality. So there's some pretty intense plugins right now. One BuddyPress, which can turn your WordPress install into kind of a social site, kind of like a Facebook, MySpace sort of site. There's another one to set up forums. I just started selling products on my website, so I use this plugin that allows you to do e-commerce really easily. And so I think those plugins that you can buy for cheap or that are free and allow you this enormous functionality is really cool. In terms of pain points, I think that's the scale of WordPress can also cause problems because WordPress is everywhere, so it's a target for hackers too, because you have this huge platform, so people can try and exploit it basically. And there's a lot of plugins out there that maybe haven't been vetted for security, or themes that haven't been vetted for security, and so people get their website hacked and they blame it on WordPress when maybe it's a plugin or a theme, but it's definitely a concern, I think, in the community. Yeah, maybe I'll end on that.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay, so let's go from general to specific. So we've talked about the good, positive aspects, and we've talked about the pain points / bad aspects. So let's focus on the specific. Some need that the user had or the organization had that you are able to meet well with that application, and we're really happy with the outcome, and perhaps why the particular tool that you were using best enabled that particular solution. So this could also be the most proud of question. If you'd like to, you could also give an example of a relatively simple problem that was very challenging to solve because of your particular constraints of your application. So I'll let you decide whether you want to do both or just the first one. Todd, let's start with you this time because, you know.
Thanks. Okay. Okay. So now I have to pick the thing I liked the most that we ever did? Is that the question?
A specific problem that a client had
okay.
That you solved with Drupal and it sold you on Drupal, your ability to solve this problem.
Okay. Performance and scalability is one, but that's not something you solve solely with Drupal, so I'm not going to talk about that stuff. There are other tools that you have to put in place to make sure that your site is performant, can scale up to millions of visitors. Drupal's a big piece of it, but I'll avoid then plugging PressFlow. So,
PressFlow.
Let's PressFlow.
Sorry, what are you not plugging again?
Oh, just this thing called PressFlow. I don't know. You may have
Thanks,
heard of
It's
it.
a fork. Yeah, you might use it.
Anyway, okay. There are lots of examples. I guess the thing, I'll go with what sold me first, because that's, that memory is clear. So publishing. When you're dealing with an organization, I'm going to talk specifically about The Economist. So we were one of many vendors, but we were the prime vendor working on this project to move the Economist magazine's website from a custom-built Cold Fusion application that they had in place for years and years and years and years into Drupal, and they had to move onto Drupal 6. And this entire migration took, the migration piece took, I don't know, maybe a year and a half or 2 years, something like that, to get tens of millions of comments and 3 or 4 million users, something like that, enormous amounts of content into Drupal. And we had to do it piece by piece. And what was interesting about Drupal is it actually allowed us to do it piece by piece. So the very first thing we moved into Drupal was their commenting system. So all of their articles and their users and all of those things still existed in their old platform, but we moved over the commenting first. And we were able to use Drupal as sort of like a services type, meaning it wasn't the A to Z delivery of a website, meaning you go to a website and it logs you in, it generates all the content, it pulls all the stuff out of the database, it renders the markup, it sends the markup to your computer, and you're done. Drupal allowed us just to pick out a little chunk of that process, everything leading up to the end of the comment, or the end of the content. So you'd see this article that got spit out, that was all Cold Fusion, and then suddenly there was the commenting system, and then the commenting area of the page ended, and then you got the footer and all the rest of the stuff. We were able to make Drupal work in such a way that only the commenting piece was being delivered through Drupal and was being picked up by this other content management system and then plugged into the page as it was being sent out. Piece by piece, we reassembled the Economist website in such a fashion so that we could slowly migrate all of this stuff off of their old system and onto the new one. So we would do the commenting system first, then the login system, then their user profile, then the articles, then the section pages, and then finally the home page. So the fact that it was flexible enough for us to say, hey Drupal, I don't want you to give me your entire web page. I just want the commenting system given this article ID. Can you give me just that? Easy to do. So Drupal doesn't have to be absolutely every aspect of your website. You can use it as something that just generates one piece of information and sends it to you. That was, I think, the thing that ultimately first sold me on, wow, Drupal can really be very powerful and very flexible in ways that are really interesting if you use your imagination.
Travis?
So when I left the PHP world, that was where I started all my programming. I was looking at Django and Rails, trying to figure out which one of those I was going to spend more time in. And the thing that sold me on Django was a component called Geo Django. How many in here have written SQL queries doing spatial query? So trying to find the distance between 2 points. Okay, yeah, about 5%, 10%. How many of you have enjoyed it? Okay, exactly what I thought. With Geo Django, what you do is you specify your model as a Geo Django model. You say, I want to give it this point, I want to give it this multi-point field, I want to give it this geometry or polygon field. And then you say, I want to do queries against that. And in the ORM, the object relational mapper in Django, it has the ability to go in and say, I have this point and I want to grab everything that's within 5 miles of it. And it can translate that to the spatial query for you. So as an example of something we just rolled out at the Texas Tribune this summer, we have a Public Schools Explorer. And you can go in and grab the latitude and longitude from a browser, a modern browser, or a mobile browser, and run that query against our database and say, give me every school that's within 5 miles of this particular point. For us to write that is us to say, take this latitude and longitude, turn it into a point, you just feed it to the point object, and then say, okay, give me everything within this particular radius. That's all we had to write to get the query for that. Now it uses PostGIS under the cover, so you have a really powerful database doing that query for us, but we didn't have to write that. That's one of the things that in all of the frameworks that I've seen out there in all of the languages, I don't think anybody has got as well as Django has. So if you're doing geo stuff, that's one of the areas where it really, really shines, and one of the killer features.
I guess the reason I really got into WordPress is I was making static sites before for clients in Dreamweaver, and every time a client wanted an update to their site, they'd have to call me, and I'd have to go into the code and I'd update it. And when I started converting websites over to WordPress, I would tell them how to log in, and maybe I'd make a little screencast showing them how to update their content. And then those phone calls stopped because they were now able to control the content of their website really easily. And it allowed me to get away from that really boring work of just updating their content, and it really empowered them to take control of their website. So that's what really attracted me to it, the simplicity of it. In terms of, I guess, things that are difficult or pain points in WordPress, I actually think we've solved a lot of those since WordPress 3.0. People, I still tend to think of WordPress as just you create blog posts and that's all you can really do. And then it had pages. But after WordPress 3.0, you can make any sort of content type. So if you have, you could do a locations content type, or you could do a books content type. And I think a lot of people don't realize that WordPress can do that now. But before that feature came out, that sort of stuff was really complex if you wanted to use different sorts of content types. So that's been largely solved. I can't think of another major pain point recently, but I know people that work with it all the time do hit limits.
Ryan?
I was trying to think of, I'm glad that you guys got to go first, so I had time to think of something. I think there's so many projects, and one that we've done where, like, you know, it's been kind of exciting to be like, oh, actually we can do this, like, you know, with Expression Engine. You know, this actually isn't that hard to implement, because when you first see it, you're like, oh, this is going to be a real pain to do. And a lot of that is because of these field types in Expression Engine, so it's really flexible, and then also all of these field types that other people create. So you can actually, you know, you have a field type that can be like a matrix of data. You have a field type that could be, you know, a file upload, but it can also be like a little mini file manager. And there's all sorts of things that you can do. And because of that, because of the, we were working with this wasn't that recent, but it's just one that came to my mind in terms of the extensibility of Expression Engine. We're working with a company that was wanting to build this social network idea for medical professionals as a place for, you know, licensed medical professionals to get together and share ideas and case studies and things like that. And what we did was, you know, at the time, Expression didn't have any social networking type of features. Now there's like all these add-ons for it, but at the time they didn't. But because Expression Engine was extensible enough and flexible enough, we could use, in Expression Engine, the data is stored in what's called channels. And we could use those channels to house anything we wanted to, but we just needed to build the layer for it to make sense to the person using the site. And we did that using modules, which are sort of like your bigger add-ons for Expression Engine. We did it using some extensions, and so we were able to take all these different pieces and put it together. And the reason that I like using Expression Engine so much is because while it is a CMS, there's also a real framework, you know, part to it, to where you actually, a lot of people just install Expression Engine and just treat it as, literally just as a framework, and they build like their own software on top of it. And so that's one of the things. So we were able to build like this little social network for medical professionals on a tool that really is built for managing content. So that was definitely one of the things that made me realize that, you know, you can really do anything, you know, anything you want with this as long as you know how to write the software to make it happen.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes before we want to give 10 minutes for people to ask questions. And I definitely want to get to responsive and how these applications are adapting to a world in which people are not on their desktop when they're accessing the site. So before we go there, I want to ask 2 questions, and maybe we can think of them in terms of a list, right? Three things. On one hand, how can any one of us who have become interested and excited about one of these applications, how can you best make it better? So in the open source world, right, the word would be contribute, but I'm assuming all of them have ways for you to develop expertise to push and be able to push progress. Mm-hmm. So maybe 3 ways that one could do that, or ways you've done that, whichever. And then the other one is making money, right? How do you generate revenue? And you know, what are the pathways to generating revenue? And you know, especially for people new to the CMS, maybe a little bit about the way to focus to generate revenue using one of these applications. Travis,
Three ways that somebody can contribute. Documentation. The documentation of Django is excellent with one big hole in it. It has a really good, I've got 30 minutes, I may not even know Python. I want to understand how to get this software installed and do something with it. At the end of that 30 minutes, you'll have the sample app created and you'll be using it. Then they have really, really good documentation on, I have a good understanding of how Django works, and I just need to understand this one component of it and how I need to be interacting with it to get the behavior that I want. The gulf between, I've just finished my first 30 minutes with Django and I've been using it for 3 months, is huge. And that's a very hard gulf for people to traverse. So if somebody was wanting to get involved in the project and wanting to help out, that's a huge area where there's a hole in the documentation. So that's something that I would definitely encourage people to do. Coding is another big thing. Helping to do coding, but then all of the housekeeping work around that. The ticket tracker on Django is huge, has some 18,000 tickets, most in a state of closed. There might be 100 or so that are in some state of open or needing to be triaged. So helping keep an eye on that, even if you can't necessarily contribute and say, hey, I'm going to tackle fixing this problem, being able to say, yeah, I was able to replicate this. So now there's 2 people in the world that have seen this problem. It's a volunteer project. Everybody that's on the core team of Django is doing it out of the goodness of their heart. And they're not getting paid to work on it. So as such, their time is very valuable. If they're having to go in and try to reproduce bugs instead of just fixing them and having a list of things that are known, that's an area where somebody can help out. A third way to help out, being a part of the community. The Django community is really welcoming and open to new developers. We have a great IRC channel. The mailing list is really good. So participating in that and being a part of that community. I think you could probably sum up all 3 of these by saying, join the community and be a part of it. Ways to make money. Being a consultant. Django consultants right now are like gold, or working for a company that's doing Django work. People doing Django projects are generally not trying to solve a simple problem. They're doing something where a traditional CMS breaks down. They need something with a bit more flexibility. We have everything from data apps running on Washington Post all the way through this past fall. There was a startup doing real-time communication, trying to take on sort of a melding of the online forum and IRC into a web client, and that was powered by Django. So there's this huge expanse of things that can be done. So learning the system and putting yourself out there as somebody who's wanting to work and try to solve these hard problems. If you say that you're a Django developer and trying to find work, people will beat your door down. I actually have a friend who was out at DjangoCon, it was 2 weeks ago. She's looking for work right now, hadn't been actively advertising that she's looking for work. I'd mentioned it to a couple of people very quietly at DjangoCon. She came back the day after and was getting an email every 30 minutes from different companies, not recruiters, companies, CEOs and co-founders saying, hey, we would love you to come work on this project. Can we talk for a little bit and tell you what we're doing? So the way to make money in Django right now is just to be a Django developer.
Everything for WordPress is at wordpress.org. There's a number of ways to contribute. We have forums, so anyone can go in, ask questions, and answer questions. That's, I think, how most people get their start. There's themes on wordpress.org, and people review those themes for security and quality, which I do occasionally too. Or you can contribute a theme. Both are good. And I think both of those ways also help you become a much better developer because you see what other people are doing and help them improve it, and you also meet the guidelines for making good themes. You can also contribute plugins. And then, of course, you can contribute to the core project. That's all on track. SVN, you can check out copies. You can post bugs. You can solve bugs. You can post features. So a lot of ways to contribute. There's also mobile apps that are in development. If there's any mobile developers, all those are also open source projects. In terms of making money, there's a lot of ways for WordPress. I was obviously a consultant. I'm working for a company. There's a lot of work out there right now. There's also a lot of people have been selling themes, like on a place like Theme Forest, or selling WordPress products, plugins, and a lot of people are making a lot of money doing that as well. And then services. So there's a lot of ways, I think, and there's a big demand for good developers, like any of these, I think.
3 things in Expression Engine that you can do to help. The first one is to create an add-on. If you are a developer and you have working on a project and you have an itch and you scratch it, then share that back with the community. And of course, in our community, since we're based on a commercial CMS, everybody has this bias towards commercial add-ons first. So it doesn't matter though if you want to release an add-on and charge for it, as long as it's good and you support it, then people will happily pay for it. You can also give it away for free if you want. Another thing you can do is LS Lab, the company that makes Expression Engine, they have this thing called a reactor team. And this is a very small group of developers in the community who they've chosen that can independently work on some Expression Engine features. So it's almost like a sort of like dipping their toes in the open source model, except that each of those features or any of those changes have to be approved by the company and then rolled back into the product. And that happens with almost every release where there's at least a few things that have been rolled back in from the community. The nice thing about that then is that you really have a say into like what gets put in. Another way to contribute is to teach people how to use Expression Engine. For the last 4 years, I believe next week will be the 4-year anniversary, I've been running a help chat every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. And it's a group of people come in, a lot of people that are new to Expression come in and ask questions, a lot of people that know a lot about Expression Engine come in and just share a problem that they were having. So you can do something like that. You can write articles about how you did something with Expression Engine, people writing their own blogs. I run a site called EE Insider, which is like a news and how-to site where people contribute articles. And you can just do events. We have like meetups and things like that. Organize a meetup and help other people that are new. And those are the ways to help out with the community. One way to not help out the community is to complain on Twitter. That's a great way to not help. As far as making money, I mean, I think I think I've already alluded to it here that there's a lot of people making a lot of money in the Expression Engine space because you have to hit the threshold or not the threshold, but I mean, it takes 200 hours just to get in. I mean, you have to spend 200 hours on the CMS just to be in. So people are used to paying for things on Expression Engine, especially good stuff. And we're a smaller community, much smaller than Drupal or WordPress or even Django for sure. But I like to think that we are a highly profitable community, and we have really, really good developers that create really good things. For the CMS, and so you can create an add-on and sell it. There's a site called Devotee. It's devot-ee.com, and it started out as just an index of like all the add-ons that are out there for Expression Engine. And Ryan Masuga, the guy that created it, he turned that into a storefront then, where people, it's almost like the Apple App Store model, where people, it's like it's like the marketplace through the community now to sell add-ons, and they take a little cut, but they give you all the hosting and the storefront that you need. So that's one way. So not only are add-on developers making money, but the company that runs Devotee is making money because they're actually providing all these services. Lots of great services like reporting, and there's an API so you can hook into it with your own license, codes and things like that. Other things, training materials, which is something that I personally have done. You can do well creating training materials for people. So add-ons, training materials, and then of course consulting. A lot of people do Expression Engine consulting. There's a lot of, as I think there probably is with WordPress too, a lot of one-man or one-person shops or very, very small shops that are doing Expression Engine consulting, and they do really well at it.
Okay, ways you can get involved in Drupal. So we've already talked about joining community sites, filing bugs, doing things like that. I want to highlight some very specific things. Ryan touched on some of them that I think are much more accessible to most of the people in this room and to most Drupal users in general, and that would be help other Drupal people. There is a Drupal newbie group. Fido, are you here?
He left.
Oh, he left? Okay. There are two local meetup groups in Austin. There's the sort of the regular Austin Drupal meetup group, and then there's a Drupal newbie group. The Drupal newbie group is really interesting because this is where a lot of people bring their problems and they talk about, hey, how do I make the calendar thing work? This is all weird. Has anybody ever done a calendar thing before in Drupal? That kind of one-on-one help, which can be done through IRC or on the forums or in person in meetup groups, is really critical. Drupal is about a personal touch. The Drupal community has grown entirely through people interacting in a very personal way, either on IRC or going to events like this, or going to DrupalCon or whatever. I'd say that's probably the most accessible and important thing that you could do. Even explaining, I'm not quite sure how we did it, but I know that we used a view and we put that inside a panel and then that did this other thing. Just talking about the modules that you found, there are tens of thousands of them. It's impossible to know all of them that are out there and what they all do. Just talking to other people, that is the big one. Obviously, of course, create an account at Drupal.org. If you find bugs, please file them. Include screenshots or output of error messages, all of those things to help the developers and the maintainers of those modules and core improve their projects. Drupal goes through major, when Drupal does major release cycles, such as Drupal 6, Drupal 7, Drupal 8, there are periods in which you can be very heavily involved in core, either by testing it or by suggesting new functionality, voting on new functionality, or actually writing new functionality. We are in one of those phases right now. We have not yet hit what we call code freeze, which means we stop writing code and then we test what's there. You can still actively be doing stuff that will wind up in Drupal 8. So if there are serious problems that you've had with Drupal 6 or 7 that you want to see fixed in 8, now you can actually have your voice heard before the doors gently close and we polish what we need to do in Drupal and then look ahead to Drupal 9. How do you make money in Drupal? Okay. WordPress and EE and Joomla, and I'm not sure about Django. A lot of these communities focus somewhat, to varying degrees, on the sale of plugins or add-ons or themes or things like that. I just believe that software should be free. And all of Drupal software stuff is free. Drupal core is free, the modules are free. Not all the themes are free, and there's a philosophical difference there that I'll happily explain in gruesome detail later on, but there's not time to do so. Bottom line is, you're going to make money through services. You're not going to make money selling anything with Drupal. You're not going to be able to sell a product in Drupal unless there's a service behind it. What I mean by services would be hosted platform with support, consulting services, theming, designing, stuff like that. That's how you make money in Drupal. There are other smaller niche ways to do so, but really we're increasingly a service economy just as a planet, and Drupal is no exception to that. So services, that's how you make money in Drupal.
And to add, bring this all together, and also in my work with CMSs, it's the one area of my life where if you focus on becoming very, very good at what you do, then you will become very, very popular. And it's a beautiful thing. And that sounds like this is true for all of them, right? If you really geek out and you become an expert at any one of these applications, then you're going to be a very valued and valuable commodity on the open market. And therefore, fundamentally, what it comes down to is become very, very, very good at what you do, regardless of the tool that you use to do it. So we are at, I think, 5 minutes, are we? 4 minutes. Aaron, do we have any? Okay.
What about the responsive?
Are we not going to do the mobile?
Yeah. Well, maybe are one of the questions about responsive?
Hurry up and ask right now.
Okay, talk about mobile real quick. Okay. So we're going to talk about mobile real quick. So the primary question here is how is the framework and/or system and/or application, how's it doing to respond to the fact that people are more and more accessing sites not from their desktop? I'll start with you this time around.
Expression Engine itself, the control panel where you manage your whole site, is not responsive out of the box. I believe, if I remember correctly, somebody was kind of playing with responsive theme for the control panel, but I don't think that's anything that, if I remember correctly, it's not anything that people are widely using. So in that sense, if I was going to log in on my phone to a website, to my website to manage it, it would definitely be an interesting challenge because it's small.
Bad, aka bad.
Yeah. There is a company that created an iPhone and an iPad app that is pretty much like, if you, I don't know if any of you have ever used Mars Edit, which is a tool for managing, a lot of people use it to manage WordPress blogs and stuff. It's a Mac OS X tool. So it's like a iOS app that lets you manage your expression engine site from the app. So that's really like the only thing I can think of that would be on mobile. But the way expression engine is set up with all these different field types and all these different types of data you can use that sort of like a static mobile app from the App Store just doesn't cut it sometimes because that's not the experience that you actually want the people managing the site to have. So that's where we're at. Unfortunately, it's not. It's really not that far along yet.
The majority of a responsive experience is going to happen on the front end, meaning in Drupal on the theme layer. So it's the markup, it's the CSS, it's the JavaScript that you use to achieve some kind of a responsive or mobile-friendly experience. So in Drupal, it's a matter of changing your theme. You could do this in Drupal 5, you could do this in Drupal 6, you could do this in Drupal 7. You would have to rewrite the markup, the JavaScript, and the CSS in your theme to make it responsive. However, there are a handful of things that Drupal core needs to be doing differently and will be doing differently in 8. So when Drupal 7 was built, this whole idea of responsive design didn't even exist yet. That tells you just how quickly responsive design has sort of come about, last year and a half, 2 years, something like that. So core markup, meaning any markup that's stored in Drupal core, like the theme functions and the default templates and all of that, and the CSS that's delivered by Drupal core out of the box, that needs to be and is being rewritten to be more responsive friendly. The other thing though that Drupal's doing that's kind of unique is that it's starting to focus more on services. Now I'm reusing the word services in a completely different context here. So before I said services in the sense of I'm going to build you a website and that's a service that I provide. But Drupal is focusing more and more on services from the web standpoint of this website is providing individual bits of information or pieces of utility that it will spit out one at a time to something, such as a mobile device. So Drupal is changing fundamentally in a way to become not, I mentioned before, this sort of A to Z provider of a website. You go to a website and you see all of the markup and all of the stuff that it's going to do and it just hands it to you on your computer. Instead, it's going to focus more on what does this person want in this moment on a specific device. And it will selectively send only those things that are important to that user at that time. That requires what's called services in Drupal. And it's too nuanced and complicated a subject to try and talk about now. But Drupal itself will be changing and becoming more like a framework and less like a content management system in order to provide stuff like this. So in fact, Drupal someday may be the underlying thing that powers an expression engine site or a Django site or something like that. So the nature of Drupal itself is going to be changing in order to be more responsive and friendly.
When you say services, do you mean like service-oriented architecture, that style of services?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. So at DjangoCon a week and a half ago, mobile came up a couple of times. Adrian Halavati, the co-BDFL of the project, brought it up in his keynote. And one of the things that he wants to see in Django core within the next year is PJAX support. So partial page rendering. So you don't have to have a full transition or a full page refresh to change out a portion of it. But as part of a broader discussion that was had with a smaller group of individuals, we were talking about how Django fits into the world where something like Meteor exists. How many of you here have played with Meteor.js? Wow, okay, 1. 2, I would recommend going and watching the screencast on this when you get home today. It's a really cool real-time framework written on top of Node.js, so it's all JavaScript all the way down. But the concepts behind it are really, really interesting in that you're designing a system that's going to react real-time. You're creating your templates in one place, and they're working both server-side if it needs to for legacy clients, and client-side if you're working with a modern client. How Django fits into that in the long term is actually very much where it sounds like Drupal is going. It will be the server component of that. So to do real-time web, you have to be able to provide a service. The same way if you're sending something to an iOS app, doing mobile. So out of the box, that's where Django is going with this. It's still a few years down the road, obviously, because this is still a very, very formative time in real time, and less so in mobile, but definitely mobile as well. But I see Django being the server-side component that powers that, more than something that is here out of the box, install this, and now everything just works mobile. It comes back to being something that you're meant to build your site on top of. So that would be the place where Django fits in that.
Well, yeah, I think WordPress is really pushing the edge on this. WordPress ships with the default theme every year. 2011 was last year, and it was fully responsive design. The new one, 2012, is fully responsive as well. In terms of the dashboard, it does some things right now, like the left nav collapses a little bit on a small screen. We're shooting for full Retina support in WordPress 3.5. I think it's also going to be fully responsive, the dashboard area. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. And we're also working on a bunch of, I say we, but the community is really working on mobile apps too, because you get a lot more functionality with native apps. Like you can use your phone on your app, and you can use your camera on your phone and post stuff and get a lot of extra functionality. So there's open source projects for all the platforms. I think there's even a Windows 7 native app that's being worked on. So they're really pushing the edge on that, and that's where we're going with WordPress.
Thank you. Okay, so we are out of time. We're over time, actually, which is always a good sign. So I have a couple of suggestions. If you guys would take a look on Twitter at the Drupal Day ATX Twitter feed and see if there's a specific question, and then challenge yourselves to answer the question in 160 characters. The other thing is at 5 o'clock today, we're having an after party at Easy Tiger, which is really nearby. Not to put you guys on the spot of whether you'll be there or not, but if they're there, feel free to buy them a drink and ask them your questions. And if they're not there, then to visit the community site for each one of these applications. And there's a lot of information that may guide you to what you need to know. And then also, of course, download them or buy them or read Ryan's book and play with them. And because the best way to learn web development is to do web development. So, all right. Thank you very much.